Hi everyone, Nick here from RACV News and Lifestyle. I'm here today with James Williams, who's going to talk to me about something that I find super exciting and is going to change what motoring is in Australia forever. Automated vehicles. Although automated vehicles might sound like something out of science fiction, in reality, they're much, much closer to being commonplace on our roads than you might think. James, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks, Nick.
Are there automated vehicles on our roads already?
Well, yes, there are already automated vehicles here, and really, in a sense, that's why RACV is out in the community talking about automated vehicles, because they're already here. And RACV is a great champion of innovation and technology, but we also know that they need to be safely deployed. With human error being such a significant part of the road safety issue here in Victoria and indeed Australia, we know that there's enormous advantages or benefits with automated vehicles, but it needs to be done properly.
I think it's really important here to actually define what we mean when we talk about automated vehicles, because it's not so much a yes or no black and white question, is it?
So we have cars with no automation, level 0. Level 1 is a vehicle that might have, for example, cruise control. So it can set the speed, but it doesn't adjust over time as the traffic changes. Level 2 is that next level of automation where there might be, say, for example, adaptive cruise control or stability control or automatic braking. But these are all driver's aids or driver assistance. The next stage is when it changes to automated driving function, and that's level 3. And level 3 is when the vehicle might be in automated driving mode for some of the time, but because the conditions change, say for example you drive onto gravel road or off the freeway, depending on what the vehicle's spec is, the human driver must take back control and start driving again. Level 4 is the same as level 3. However, if you don't take back control, the vehicle can come to a safe stop. And that's the difference between 3 and 4. And then once you're in that situation, the question is, well, to what extent does the human have to monitor and supervise? And we can see there another continuum where there's a point where we won't have to. And that leads us to level 5, where it's fully automated and self-driving.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but automated vehicles essentially work by either connecting to, its environment or by sensing it using a variety of cameras, sensors, lidar, radar, and then getting all that information and sending it to the brain, the central computer of the vehicle, and then working that out how to drive safely. Is that right?
You've said it perfectly, Nick.
Beautiful.
It's a fusion model. So they're using various inputs in real time to assess the world around it to ensure that it drives safely. Absolutely. There's some things where the technology wouldn't necessarily drive how we drive. The automated driving systems do tend to be conservative. We are seeing some sort of the etiquette around driving, which isn't the same. They're not necessarily as quick to or as slow to overtake, or their judgment might not necessarily be the same as yours. So some people might experience some frustration there or concerns or friction that the automated driving system isn't going fast enough or courteous enough. And we're wrestling here with a computer.
So we know we do have some levels of automation on our roads in Australia already. And the first one that comes to mind is the Tesla. If I'm driving one of these automated vehicles right now in 2026 in Australia, what are my responsibilities as the driver?
Well, Nick, it's really important that you continue to comply with the road rules. It's as simple as that. And the number one rule there is proper control of the vehicle. And as a human driver, you are still responsible for the operation of your vehicle, and therefore you have to have a hand on the steering wheel, at least one hand, or you could be non-compliant with the proper control rule. So it's an interesting experience because you're in the car, you've got the steering wheel in front of you. The steering wheel is literally moving for you and navigating the car, and you don't feel you need to have your hands on the wheel, but legally today you must. Now, clearly there will be a point where that won't be necessary, but until the law changes, it's absolutely important that you do that. And it's not just because it's complying with the law, there's also a road safety element to that, because we talked earlier about that monitoring or supervising role. If you've got your hands on the wheel, you're much more likely to be concentrating on what's happening in front of you and ensuring the vehicle is doing the right thing. Hands off the wheel, you might be more lax. So there's a road safety benefit. It does help with focus and concentration.
So basically speaking, if I'm driving an automated vehicle right now in Australia, I should be obeying all the road rules and regulations as if I was driving a non-automated vehicle.
And that includes keeping a hand on the steering wheel.
Do we need an update to our drivers licence test in Victoria?
RACV certainly thinks so. We do know that at the moment the focus is very much on those three elements that I first spoke about, the steering, the braking and the manoeuvring of the vehicle. We can start adding a fourth along with navigation, which is that monitoring and supervision. And that is a different mental load. It's a different task. It's about making sure that what's happening in front of you is safe and correct and being ready to take back control.
In Australia, we have some very varied road conditions. It's a big country. We have everything from deserts to built-up cities. Is Australian infrastructure, road infrastructure as it stands right now, ready for automated vehicles?
We don't really know, Nick, and that's the problem we have.
Has there been local testing of automated vehicles so far?
There has for the older technology. So we've had generations or waves of different technologies coming through. Trials and limited deployment of the next generation of automated driving technology is essential in Australia, or we don't know that it'll work properly. And there's a few things there, and you've mentioned them. So it's things like the wildlife, the kangaroo. It's true. Kangaroos behave in a way like no other animal on Earth. And designers and developers in Silicon Valley aren't thinking about the kangaroo when they develop their technology. It's our road signs that are different, our lane markings are all different. We know from Tesla and we know from early work from other automated vehicle operators here in Australia that it's looking pretty good. It's looking like they are able to distinguish between line markings and be able to read signs safely and correctly. We're able to see an automated driving system perform a hook turn, for example, here in Melbourne. Did it safely and perfectly fine.
Which is better than a lot of human drivers sometimes.
Yes, and the automated driving system was not frightened of the hook turn and prepared to do it and did it well. It didn't avoid the hook turn intersection. So we're pretty confident we'll get there. I think it's just a matter of when, not if. But in the meantime, we think it's very important, especially for those driverless vehicles with no human driver at all, so fully automated. For those vehicles, we would expect a trial, a limited deployment, before we have it all rolled out. So I'm talking about like the Robotaxi we're seeing in California.
What do we know about how safe automated vehicles are?
Well, they're in their infancy, so it's difficult to know exactly how safe they are. Tesla's own analysis suggests that the recently improved fully self-driving technology can go about 5 million miles before a major crash. Now, for the average American human driver, they can go about 700,000 miles before a major crash. So that's a significant improvement. However, obviously this is a very limited set of data. They haven't done a lot of mileage, and it does depend on that human interaction as well as, of course, the road conditions.
What do we know so far about the safety of pedestrians, bike riders around automated vehicles?
So far, pretty good. So there have been some incidences where in America we've seen collisions with cyclists, for example, but that seems to have been when the human driver was in control of the vehicle. So overall, we are hopeful that automated vehicle technologies will do better for cyclists and pedestrians and other road users than humans, and that's simply because they have more eyes, if you like, on the road, and they're able to see more than we can see. There is some interesting work being done, though, around how humans are able to preempt activity. And the great example is the balloon going across the road. If we see a balloon on a string going across a road, we might think to ourselves there could be a child coming out to catch the balloon, whereas an automated driving system might not. So there's some work to do there. It's the role of the government to ensure that they do ultimately have a net safety benefit for society, or why are we doing this?
What road safety regulations and frameworks need to be put in place at a federal level, nationwide, but also at a state level, perhaps in Victoria, to safely deploy automated vehicles in Australia?
So Australian road rules are all geared up for a human driver. The federal responsibility is really about saying there's a corporation behind this automated driving system entity. They have responsibility for corporations law, and the federal government has a responsibility for setting up a regulator with powers to enforce what we would call accreditation. The government has signalled that's what they will do. Transport ministers have agreed to that, but we haven't yet seen the detail of what that will look like. And the time frame, we're looking at either 27, 28. We think that it does need to happen sooner because the vehicles are starting to arrive in the market. Not so much the driverless vehicles yet, but we are seeing other vehicles coming onto the market. They're nudging those lower levels of automation. They're starting to look much more like what we call level 3, level 4, highly automated vehicles. So they're important that we capture those, because when you are in a vehicle and you're not driving the car, it's fair enough to say you're not necessarily responsible for the driving of the car. And that's where it's very important that we have a regulator that will define that, be clear about that, and will also ensure that the data's there so that if there is something that goes wrong, we can identify who was driving at that time. Was it the automated driving system entity, or was it the human driver?
We've already got automated vehicles of the lower levels of automation on our roads in Australia. The next step up, the level 4s, are coming imminently. What do the next few years look like for Australia in terms of automated vehicles?
We're going to see a lot of activity coming. We've got a lot of new brands coming from China. We've got some very exciting things happening in Silicon Valley, in California. We would expect to see probably 2 strands, if you like, of activities, 2 use cases, pretty much in parallel. On the one hand, we're going to see vehicles that you can buy in the showroom that have automated driving systems built into them, or indeed an existing vehicle that has an over-the-air update and you have an automated vehicle. And it's your vehicle, you're driving it, and you can choose to put it into automated driving mode. And it might be able to be automated only in the city, or maybe only on freeways, or maybe mostly everywhere. And then on the other hand, you're going to have automated vehicles that no one buys, but they're mobility as a service. They're vehicles that you can dial up, or they might be shuttles that you jump on at a campus or an airport or a precinct of some kind. And they are driverless. There's no human driver, they're self-driving, but they may or may not be limited in where they go and will merely be passengers. And that's very exciting. It might be a car, or it might be a shuttle, or some other kind of vehicle. But we'll see the 2 of them coexist for many years, I imagine. And then ultimately, we'll have automated driving systems and vehicles that can just go anywhere, and no human drivers necessary at all.
Which is very exciting. I feel like I am living in a science fiction novel or something.
And in our own lifetimes, I'm sure.
I know. Thank you so much for talking with me today, James. It's such an exciting thing to be happening, and I almost don't feel like it's being talked about enough. If you've got any questions about automated vehicles, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Get more news and advice by downloading the RACV app to stay up to date with all our latest home, motoring and travel content.